The Trap House. Haunting. In the heart of Atlanta, a decrepit trap house stood at the end of a dark street. It was a place where YSL and Young Thug ruled the underground, and rivalries simmered like a pot on the verge of boiling over. One night, after a heated exchange of diss tracks and social media jabs, the tension reached a breaking point. Young Thug, known for his flamboyant style and relentless ambition, had been at odds with YFN Lucci and his crew for months. The streets buzzed with rumors of a face-off, each side ready to prove dominance. But that night, as a storm rolled in, things took a darker turn. As the rain poured, Thug gathered his crew in the trap house, plotting their next move. The walls echoed with laughter, but an unsettling feeling hung in the air. In the corner, a flickering light caught Thug's eye. He brushed it off. Just a power surge, he thought. But the laughter faded as an eerie silence enveloped them. Meanwhile, YFN Lucci and his gang were nearby, strategizing in a different spot. Tension crackled between them, fueled by the desire for revenge. They decided to pay a visit to the trap house, not for peace, but to settle scores. As they approached, thunder rumbled ominously overhead. The wind howled, and the shadows deepened. Unbeknownst to both crews, the spirits of past conflicts lingered in the air, trapped by their own vendettas. Back inside, Thug's crew began to hear whispers, cold and distant. "Leave. This place isn't yours." They dismissed it as paranoia, but the whispers grew louder, transforming into a chorus of anguished voices, those lost in the streets, caught in the cycle of violence. Suddenly, the front door burst open. Lucci and his gang stormed in, eyes blazing. "This ends tonight," Lucci shouted. The atmosphere shifted. The air felt electric. Both sides faced off, weapons drawn, but the haunting voices rose to a deafening crescendo. "Stop!" the voices cried, their wails echoing through the room. The combatants froze, caught in the surreal moment. One by one, the spirits materialized, ghostly figures of fallen friends and foes, their faces twisted in agony. Realizing the weight of their actions, both crews hesitated. The realization dawned. Their hatred only fed the cycle of violence. The spirits began to speak, their words chilling, yet clear. "You must choose life, not death. Break the chains of the past." In that moment, Thug and Lucci locked eyes. Memories of lost friends flashed before them, the impact of their choices weighing heavily. Slowly, they lowered their weapons, the tension dissipating into a profound silence. As the storm outside began to clear, the spirits faded, their cries replaced by a quiet understanding. The trap house, once a place of conflict, transformed into a monument of hope. The two crews, once bitter rivals, chose to leave their animosity behind. From that day forward, the trap house became a symbol of unity in Atlanta. Young Thug and YFN Lucci began to collaborate, using their influence to uplift their communities rather than tear them apart. And as for the spirits, they finally found peace, their haunting no longer echoing through the streets. In the end, what could have been a night of violence became a story of redemption, proving that even in the darkest corners of the trap, light can break through. The haunting of Woody. In the gritty heart of Atlanta, two factions ruled the streets, Woody and YFN Lucci. Their rivalry was infamous, a violent clash fueled by pride, respect, and a series of betrayals that left scars deeper than any bullet wound. The tension between them had become palpable, and every encounter threatened to ignite a war that could consume both crews. One fateful night, Lucci's crew gathered in an old abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of Rivertown. The place was rumored to be haunted, a site of past conflicts, that had turned deadly. As they plotted their next move against Woody, an unsettling chill filled the air, and the flickering lights cast ominous shadows that danced across the walls. "Why do we even meet here?" one member asked, glancing nervously around. "This place gives me the creeps." "Focus," Lucci replied, his voice steady, but his eyes betraying a hint of unease. "We've got to send a message." Meanwhile, Woody's crew was just a few blocks away, gathering for their own strategy session. Their leader, known for his ruthless reputation, had caught wind of Lucci's plans. He was ready to retaliate, believing that a show of force would finally establish dominance. As midnight approached, the streets were eerily quiet. Both crews decided to converge at a nearby corner known for its history of violence. The atmosphere crackled with tension as they faced off, the air thick with unspoken animosity. Suddenly, a strange mist rolled in, enveloping the street. The temperature dropped sharply, and a low moan echoed through the air. Both sides froze, their bravado replaced by confusion and fear. "What's going on?" Woody's leader shouted, looking around in disbelief. Just then, ghostly figures began to emerge from the fog. Spirits of those who had fallen in the countless battles, fought over territory and respect. Their faces were twisted in anguish, eyes hollow and pleading. "Stop!" One spirit cried out, its voice chilling. "You're bound to this cycle of violence. If you fight tonight, you'll join us." Lucci and Woody's leader exchanged glances, the weight of the moment pressing down on them. The specters of the past surrounded them, a stark reminder of the lives lost to their feud. Fear gripped the crews, their bravado crumbling in the face of such a powerful manifestation. "We're not scared of ghosts," one of Lucci's men shouted defiantly, raising his weapon. But before he could act, the spirits surged forward, their ethereal forms blocking the way. "Choose life," another spirit implored, sorrow etched on its translucent face. "This war will only bring more pain and suffering." In that moment, something shifted within Lucci. The memories of lost friends and the futility of their feud flooded his mind. "We can't keep doing this," he finally said, his voice barely above a whisper. "We need to break this cycle." Woody's leader stepped forward, understanding dawning in his eyes. "If we fight, it's not just us who will suffer. We owe it to those we've lost to find another way." As they reached out to each other, the spirits seemed to brighten, their expressions shifting from despair to hope. The cold air began to warm, and the mist started to dissipate. In a moment of solidarity, both leaders shook hands, signaling an end to the hatred that had consumed them. As they did, the spirits cheered silently, their figures glowing before slowly fading away into the night. From that night on, the streets of Rivertown transformed. Lucci and Woody forged an alliance, choosing to uplift their community instead of tearing it apart. The warehouse, once a symbol of conflict, became a hub for change, a place where they held gatherings to promote peace and collaboration. And as for the spirits, they finally found rest, their haunting no longer binding the living to the past. The chilling echoes of their conflict faded, replaced by the sounds of unity and hope, a powerful reminder that even in the darkest of times, redemption, the noose, tightens. In Atlanta, the air was thick with ambition and rivalry, but it was also laced with an undercurrent of dread. Young Thug, the flamboyant leader of YSL, had carved out his place in the rap game, but his success had also attracted the attention of law enforcement. As rumors of a RICO case against him began to circulate, the tension among rival gangs intensified. One evening, Thug gathered his crew in a dimly lit studio, the walls adorned with accolades and memories of past triumphs. The atmosphere was charged with excitement over an upcoming album, but beneath that excitement lay a palpable fear. Whispers of investigations and impending arrests echoed through the streets, leaving everyone on edge. "Yo, we need to watch our backs," one member said, glancing nervously at the door. "They're coming for us." Thug, always confident, waved it off. "Let them try. We're untouchable." But deep down, he felt the weight of the world on his shoulders. The streets had eyes and ears, and the noose of the law was tightening. As night fell, Thug decided to step out for a breath of fresh air, the cool breeze contrasting with the heat of the studio. He walked toward a nearby park, trying to shake off the mounting anxiety. But as he moved deeper into the shadows, he felt as if he was being watched. Suddenly, a group of men emerged from the darkness, members of a rival gang emboldened by the chaos surrounding YSL. Their eyes gleamed with malice, and a chilling silence settled over the scene. "This is our turf now, Thug," their leader sneered, stepping forward. "You think you can just walk away?" Thug's heart raced. He had faced countless foes, but tonight felt different. The air was thick with an ominous energy, almost as if the very streets were warning him of impending doom. "I don't want any trouble," Thug replied, trying to keep his voice steady. But the rival leader laughed, the sound cold and menacing. "You're in too deep, man. You think this is just about music." Before Thug could respond, the rival gang advanced, their intentions clear. Just then, the ground shook, and a deafening noise echoed through the park. Sirens blared in the distance, growing louder by the second. "Run!" Thug shouted, his instincts kicking in. He sprinted back toward the studio, adrenaline coursing through his veins. Behind him, he could hear the chaos of the rival gang breaking apart, their bravado shattered by the approaching sirens. As he burst through the door of the studio, he found his crew in a frenzy. "They're coming for us," one shouted, panic in his voice. Thug's heart sank as he realized the full weight of their situation. It wasn't just about a rival gang anymore. It was about survival. The sirens grew closer, and just as the crew scrambled to hide evidence, a loud crash echoed from the front of the building. Officers swarmed in, their badges shining in the dim light, weapons drawn. "YSL, you're under arrest!" one officer shouted, and Thug felt the walls closing in around him. The nightmare he had been trying to outrun had finally caught up with him. In the chaos, Thug caught a glimpse of something in the corner of his eye. A shadowy figure standing in the back of the studio, watching. It was a spirit, a manifestation of the countless lives lost in the streets, the souls that had been taken by violence and greed. "Thug," the spirit cried, its voice echoing with pain. "You're on the brink of losing everything. The path you've chosen leads to darkness." But Thug was too overwhelmed to listen. As he was handcuffed and led outside, he could feel the weight of the streets pressing down on him, the consequences of his choices finally manifesting. In the days that followed, as he sat in a cold cell, Thug reflected on the life he had built and the choices that had led him there. The ghostly figure haunted his thoughts, a reminder of the cost of his fame. He knew he had to confront the demons of his past if he ever wanted to reclaim his freedom. As he fought against the RICO charges, the streets continued to echo with whispers of his downfall. Rival gangs thrived in the chaos, but the spirit of the streets remained, watching, waiting for someone to break the cycle of violence and ambition. In the end, young Thug realized that his true battle was not just against the law, but against the ghosts of his past. The horror of the streets was real, and the only way out was to change the narrative before it consumed him entirely. The shadows of betrayal. In Atlanta, the streets echoed with the vibrant sounds of hip-hop, but beneath the surface, tension simmered between two of the city's biggest stars, Young Thug and Gunna. Once inseparable, their bond had frayed, and whispers of betrayal began to circulate. The air was thick with animosity, and a storm was brewing. One evening, Young Thug gathered his crew at a secluded trap house on the outskirts of the city. The walls were covered in graffiti, remnants of a life lived in the shadows. They discussed their plans, but the atmosphere was heavy. Thug could feel the weight of the betrayal hanging over him, a gnawing sense of unease. "We need to make a statement," one member said, breaking the tense silence. "Show Gunna we won't back down." Thug nodded, but felt conflicted. He remembered the camaraderie they once shared, the dreams they built together. But as the night wore on, anger simmered beneath his cool exterior. As the clock ticked closer to midnight, a strange chill settled in the trap house. The flickering lights cast long shadows, and an ominous feeling enveloped them. Thug stood, looking out the window, and saw a flicker of movement in the darkness, a figure lurking just outside. "Yo, check that out," he said, pointing. The crew peered through the glass but saw nothing. They shrugged it off, dismissing it as paranoia. Meanwhile, Gunna was nearby, strategizing with his own crew. The tension between them was palpable, a crack in their once solid friendship. Gunna felt the betrayal deep within, fueled by the need to establish himself apart from Thug. As midnight struck, both crews prepared to meet at a nearby park, a location charged with memories and unspoken words. The air was electric with anticipation, and the moon hung low in the sky, casting an eerie glow over the scene. As Thug and his crew arrived, they found Gunna already waiting, flanked by his men. The atmosphere shifted, and a heavy silence fell over them, broken only by the distant sound of cicadas. Thug's heart raced, not just with anger, but with an unsettling fear that crept in. "Why are we here?" Gunna called out, his voice steady but laced with tension. "To settle this like men." Thug stepped forward, ready to confront the betrayal that had driven them apart. "We were brothers, Gunna. Why'd you turn your back on me?" Before Gunna could respond, a sudden chill swept through the park. The ground trembled, and shadowy figures began to emerge from the darkness, ghostly apparitions of those lost to the streets. Their faces twisted in pain, they hovered between the two crews, a haunting reminder of the violence and betrayal that surrounded them. "Stop," one spirit cried, its voice echoing through the night. "This is a path of destruction. You must break the cycle." Both crews froze, caught in the surreal moment. The spirits bore witness to their conflict, their anguished expressions pleading for an end to the violence that had consumed their lives. The tension shifted, and the realization washed over Thug and Gunna. "This isn't just about us," Thug said, his voice trembling. "It's about everyone we've lost." Gunna's hardened expression softened as he glanced at the spirits, understanding the weight of their actions. "We can't keep tearing each other apart," he finally admitted, stepping forward. As they reached out, their hands meeting in a gesture of reconciliation, the spirits began to fade, their cries transforming into whispers of hope. The air warmed, and the shadows that had loomed over them began to dissipate. "Let's end this," Thug said, his voice strong. "Let's focus on what we built together, not what's tearing us apart." Gunna nodded, the weight of their shared history heavy on his heart. we owe it to our people to rise above this. In that moment, the rivalry that had threatened to consume them transformed into a powerful alliance. They chose to honor the memory of those lost, vowing to uplift their community instead of letting betrayal define them. As the sun began to rise, the park felt renewed, the spirits having finally found peace. Thug and Gunna turned toward each other, ready to face the future as allies once more. The shadows of betrayal had been banished, replaced by a new hope for the streets they called home. The curse of the streets. In a hot, humid day in Atlanta, the streets thrummed with energy. But beneath the surface, a storm was brewing. Young Thug, the charismatic leader of YSL, had carved out his place in the rap game. Yet rivalries festered like open wounds. Rumors of impending violence hung in the air, and Thug could feel the weight of it all pressing down. One fateful night, Thug gathered his crew in an abandoned trap house on the outskirts of the city. The atmosphere was electric, but a sense of foreboding lingered. Graffiti adorned the walls, telling tales of past glories and betrayals. As they discussed their plans, a cold breeze swept through the room, causing the flickering lights to dance. "Yo, something doesn't feel right," one crew member said, glancing toward the door. "This place gives me the creeps." Thug shrugged it off, dismissing the feeling as paranoia. "We're here to make moves, not fear ghosts." But as the night wore on, whispers of a rival crew plotting against them began to seep in. Thug's heart raced. He knew the streets were dangerous, and the trap house held a dark history, a place where countless conflicts had erupted, often ending sans bloodshed. As midnight approached, Thug decided to step outside for a breath of fresh air. The moon hung low, casting an eerie glow over the empty street. As he walked, he felt eyes watching him. The shadows seemed to shift, and a chill crept up his spine. Suddenly, he heard footsteps behind him. Thug turned, but there was no one there. Shaking off the feeling, he returned to the trap house, only to find the atmosphere even more charged. His crew was restless, the unease palpable. Just then, the door burst open. A rival gang flooded in, weapons drawn, eyes filled with malice. "This is our territory, Thug," their leader shouted, a smirk playing on his lips. Thug's heart raced, but he stood his ground. "You want to fight? Let's settle this." As tensions escalated, the room grew colder. The flickering lights dimmed, and a low rumble echoed from the walls. Suddenly, ghostly figures emerged from the shadows, spirits of those who had died in this very trap house, victims of past conflicts. "Stop!" one spirit cried, its voice a haunting wail. "You're destined to repeat our mistakes." Frozen in shock, both crews hesitated. The spirits hovered between them, their anguished expressions a reminder of the violence that had consumed their lives. The air thickened with the weight of lost souls. "Enough," Thug shouted, the urgency in his voice cutting through the tension. "This isn't just about us. We can't let this cycle continue." The rival leader, caught off guard, lowered his weapon slightly. "What are you talking about?" As Thug locked eyes with the spirits, he realized they were pleading for an end to the bloodshed. "We're all trapped in this cycle," he said. "We can either fight and join them, or break free and choose a different path." With a hesitant nod, the rival leader stepped forward. "What if we put our differences aside? No more bloodshed." As their hands met in a tentative truce, the spirits began to fade, their cries transforming into whispers of hope. The atmosphere shifted, and warmth returned to the trap house. In that moment, the rivalry transformed into an understanding. Thug and the rival leader vowed to honor those lost to the streets, choosing to uplift their communities instead of tearing each other apart. As dawn broke, the trap house felt lighter, the dark energy dissipating. The spirits had finally found peace, and the living had chosen to rise above their past. Young Thug realized that true strength lay not in violence but in unity, a lesson learned from the shadows of the trap, the curse, years behind bars. In the bustling heart of Atlanta, young Thug had lived a life filled with fame, fortune, and the vibrant pulse of the streets. But one fateful night, that world crumbled as he found himself behind bars, facing the harsh reality of prison life. As he was led into the dimly lit cell block, the clang of the heavy metal door echoed ominously. The air was thick with tension and the scent of despair. Thug tried to maintain his composure, but fear began to creep in. He'd heard countless stories about life in prison, the brutality, the gangs, and the shadows that lurked in the corners. His cell was small, barely enough room for a bunk and a toilet. As he settled in, the sound of laughter and shouting from the common area drifted through the bars, a reminder that he was not alone. But the laughter felt hollow, laced with menace. He could sense the eyes watching him from the shadows, assessing the new arrival. Days turned into weeks as Thug adjusted to life behind bars. He kept his head down, trying to avoid trouble, but the tension was palpable. Rival factions within the prison eyed him with suspicion. Some saw him as a target, while others wanted to test his reputation. One night, as he lay on his bunk, a strange chill swept through the cell. The lights flickered, and he heard whispers echoing in the darkness. "You think you can escape?" a voice hissed, echoing through the halls. "You're trapped here just like us." Thug sat up, heart racing. He peered into the shadows, but there was no one there. The fear of the unknown gripped him as he tried to shake off the feeling. But that night, he was haunted by restless spirits, ghosts of those who had met grim fates within these walls, their souls forever trapped by their past choices. As the days passed, Thug began to see glimpses of the dark reality surrounding him. He witnessed fights breaking out over territory, the air filled with the sound of fists colliding and the screams of those who had lost everything. The walls seemed to close in on him, the weight of the prison pressing down harder each day. One evening, while returning from the yard, Thug found himself cornered by a group of menacing inmates. Their leader stepped forward, a hulking figure with a scarred face. "You think you're untouchable, Thug? You're in our world now." Thug's heart raced. "I'm just trying to serve my time. I don't want any trouble." But the leader laughed, a chilling sound that sent shivers down Thug's spine. "Trouble finds you, whether you want it or not." As tensions escalated, Thug felt the walls of the prison closing in around him. That night, as he lay on his bunk, he was once again visited by the spirits of the damned. "You can break free," they whispered, their voices a haunting chorus. "But you must confront your fears." In a moment of clarity, Thug realized he couldn't let fear control him. He needed to take a stand. The next day, he gathered a few trusted allies and confronted the rival gang. "This doesn't have to end in violence," he said, his voice steady. "We're all trapped in here. Let's find a way to coexist." The rival leader smirked, but hesitated, sensing the resolve in Thug's eyes. "You think you can change things? This is prison, not a charity." But Thug stood firm, determination radiating from him. "We can either destroy each other or find a way to survive together. I refuse to let this place break me." As the two factions faced off, the atmosphere shifted. The spirits watched from the shadows, their whispers turning into shouts of encouragement. Slowly, the rival leader nodded, recognizing Thug's strength. "Fine, we'll talk." but don't think this is over. That night, as Thug lay in his bunk, the shadows seemed less oppressive. The spirits faded, their presence no longer a source of fear, but a reminder of resilience. He had faced the darkness and emerged stronger. Over time, Thug's influence grew within the prison. He started programs to help inmates learn and grow, turning a once hostile environment into a space for change. The laughter that filled the halls began to shift, becoming more genuine, less tainted by fear. Eventually, when he was released, Thug walked out of those prison gates, not just as a survivor, but as a changed man. The shadows of his past remained, but they no longer haunted him. Instead, they became part of his story, a testament to his strength and resilience in the face of darkness. And as he stepped back into the world, he vowed to shine a light for others still trapped in their own shadows.